Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.
Well, I've decided to change up the topic of this podcast a bit. And in this episode, I wanted to explain what exactly I'm going to be talking about in the future and also what the rationale behind it is. So I started talking about Airbnb in 2014. It's almost 4 years ago. First, I published my book in June of 2014. And the reason that I wanted to publish this book was really because I felt like there wasn't very much good information on the topic of Airbnb hosting. I started listing in 2012, and I remember looking for resources online. I read pretty much every single resource I could find. I read every single book that I could find. And, some of these resources, they provided some good insights. But I felt like there wasn't one good, really good resource that was very comprehensive and that really could lead Airbnb hosts, new Airbnb hosts from A to Z. So through the whole process of how to create your listing, how to manage your listing, how to do the hospitality and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I created the book, and that's also why I started the podcast. But now we're 4 years later, and I don't feel the same drive and the same passion that I felt 4 years ago. And as a result, I think it's been challenging for me to sort of keep up with the bi-weekly schedule of the podcast, especially since I started traveling again. My plan was to work in Amsterdam for a while, trading these cryptocurrencies. And if you've been following the podcast, you probably know that. But I can trade them from my laptop now. And also I realized after 2 months in Amsterdam that I'm just not made for staying in one place and living in a city and going to an office every day. I could just feel myself slowly. My mood was going down. It didn't feel right. So fortunately now I can trade from my laptop, so I can keep wandering as long as I want, and it's great. I'm in Panama right now. I've rented a car. And I've been driving through the country, and I've kind of taken a pause from the podcast also because I wanted to, really think about what do I want to do, what do I want to focus on. But anyway, to go back to my earlier point, I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like it's time for a change. First of all, there's a lot of people talking about Airbnb now. There's lots of other podcasts. There's a lot of other books, some really good books out there. And some good podcasts as well. There's tons of websites. I mean, it's just not really that hard to find good information on Airbnb hosting anymore. So I don't really feel like I'm doing something that's very different from everybody else out there. Because in the end of the day, Airbnb hosting, it's definitely worth to invest a lot of time in understanding how to run your Airbnb business. You can definitely make a lot more money if you do it well. But at the same time, it's also, there's only a certain amount of things you can talk about. And I'm pretty sure after over 230 episodes, I've talked about pretty much everything. And so, it's getting a little old for me, and I want something new. And so I thought, okay, how can I talk about something that other people don't talk about, but at the same time, something that people are interested in, a topic where I can provide value and not, do something different than everybody else. And so, as many of you probably know, I'm writing a book on Airbnb investing or short-term rental investing. I sold my house almost a year ago, my house in Amsterdam, or my apartment, I should say. It's already almost a year ago that I sold it, and I spent the better part of the last 12 months traveling around the world trying to find places where I could buy a place and rent it out on Airbnb and other platforms and make a good return on investment. And so I've been to a ton of countries. I started off in Brazil. I went to Chile. I went to Panama. I spent a lot of time in Asia as well. And everywhere I went, I looked at the real estate market. I looked at the rental rates. I looked at Airbnb. I looked at what people were making on Airbnb. I looked at the legal structure. Like, is it allowed to do Airbnb? I looked at all those things. And I ended up buying 3 units so far. And they're all under construction as we speak. One is about to be finished, which is the one that I bought in Cali in Colombia. Hopefully within a couple of weeks, I'll be able to go to Colombia and welcome my first guests. And then I also bought a studio in the Philippines near the very well-known island of Boracay. And I recently purchased a small studio in a building that's yet to be built in an area in Thailand called Bang Saray. So I've purchased 3 units, and I've learned a lot. Through this journey, I've really learned a lot myself. But also, while I was looking at real estate, I was also learning about it. I was watching lots of YouTube videos, and I've been reading books on real estate because I don't have a real estate background. This is kind of new to me as well. I mean, I understand how to make money on Airbnb, and I understand what type of properties do well on Airbnb and how to manage it. But I don't know very much about real estate as a more general category. So I've been really reading up on this topic, and I'm writing my second book at the moment about this very topic. It's got a little delayed because of my venture into the cryptocurrency world, but I'm about 50-60% now. So hopefully somewhere in the summer I'll be able to publish this book. It's going to contain a lot of stories from other people as well, and I've learned a lot from interviewing other people that have invested in Airbnbs around the world as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting book. And this is a topic that I'm currently just more excited about to talk about than the good old how to create a listing, the photos, the description, how to manage it, etc. I've talked so much about all these topics already that I kind of want something new, and so I've decided to change the angle of the podcast. I wouldn't say I changed the complete category or topic of the podcast. It's still going to be about short-term rentals. It's going to be about Airbnb, but the angle that I'm going to be taking is more, how if you have some capital, how do you invest it in the short-term rental market? And how do you make a good return? So it's basically all the topics that I'm writing about in my book right now. And so, I think this is going to be interesting because I don't think there's any specific resources on this topic. There's a lot of real estate books, but I couldn't find a book that specifically talks about the short-term rental market, and then from an investing perspective. And in particular, I'm going to be talking a lot about overseas, so not in the US and not in Europe, but more in the undeveloped markets, because that just has my interest a little bit more. Also, from a practical standpoint, I don't have the capital to buy a 3-bedroom condo in a nice high rise in Manhattan. That's just out of my range, and so I've really focused on countries, like I mentioned, Colombia, Philippines, Thailand. These are developing countries where you can find properties for much cheaper than you could find them in Europe and in the US. But there's a lot more challenges, though. I mean, if I was to buy an apartment in Amsterdam, it'd be extremely easy because I know exactly how to do it. It's I grew up in the country, so it feels safe, it's easy, it feels comfortable. But sending over $100,000 to a country like the Philippines, it's a whole different ball game, right? I mean, the legal system, I don't know the legal system. I don't know. There's a lot of rules and stuff that I don't know, that I'm not familiar with, and so it's a little scary to invest in those properties, to be honest with you, because in the end of the day, if I show up and somebody tells me, yeah, I'm sorry, this is not yours, I can show them a contract, but I'm on the other side of the world. I mean, it's I don't even know how easy it is to, to go to court and get your property back. I have no idea. This is all big. These are all big question marks, but at the same time, it's also exciting. But anyway, going back to the point that if you invest in a foreign country, especially in a developing country, there's a lot more due diligence that you have to do before you feel comfortable making that choice to invest. And so there's, it's more difficult, it's more complicated, but at the same time, therein lies the opportunity, right? Because if it was super easy, then everybody could do it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to make really good returns, and also to see the prices of the properties increase. My personal opinion is that the real estate markets in Europe and US just seem so overvalued to me that I wouldn't necessarily want to buy something there. I mean, I'm sure there's regions and areas where there's upside, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the whole thing will go up even further. But at some point, I feel like the prices of real estate have to be in line with the fundamental growth of incomes, and I feel like that's kind of like out of whack a little bit right now. So that's another reason why I prefer to look, to other countries where I see more potential for upside prices. Having said that, in my analysis of these three properties that I bought, I mostly looked at, what's the rate of return that I can make on my investment. I don't really want to purely speculate on, the properties becoming more valuable in the future. Although I did choose, the locations where I choose my properties. I mean, it was a factor, right? I do think there's upside there. But even though, if these properties don't go up in value, I should still be doing well. That's kind of like my main thesis for how I look at these investments. So I also want to mention that although I'm changing the angle of the podcast, I'm also changing up the structure a bit. I'm not going to be doing the news episodes on Friday anymore. I might do like once a month just to update people on what's been going on. I feel like once a week is a little bit too much. I felt like I was talking about the same things kind of over and over. And so I think, 1 week is just not enough time for there to be a lot of interesting news in the world of Airbnb or in the short-term rental world. And so I think a monthly one should be fine. And also, as I'm on the road, as I'm traveling, it's kind of hard to schedule things. And so I'm going to do these podcasts more on the fly, right? Whenever I, feel inspired to share something, or whenever I think of a good guest to interview, I'll just make it happen, and I'll just put it online. Could be any day. Could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. Could be one a week. Could be two a week. Could be 3 a week. So completely changing it up in that way. But it's just going to be easier for me to maintain the podcast that way. And also the advantage is that I can then publish something on the day that I recorded. Right, in the last few years, I've hired a production company to edit the podcasts and to create show notes and images and all that kind of stuff. But I decided now to go back to old school of just me recording it and doing some small edits and then just uploading it, and that way I can have a podcast published pretty much within like an hour of recording it, which is also kind of cool. It almost makes it live. But at the same time, that'll also mean that maybe the quality won't be as good, but I'll still do my best to maintain a decent quality of the audio. So that's kind of like what I'm planning to do. So another thing to mention is that even though I'm changing up the angle, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be interesting for current Airbnb hosts out there, because I think that the decisions that you have to make and the things that you look at when investing in a new Airbnb, things like the area, how you pick the area, who are the people that visit that particular area, right? Who are your potential customers, and how do you cater to those customers? What kind of branding do you choose? Well, those are all questions that are, I think, very valuable for current Airbnb hosts to ask themselves as well. Plus, I'll be talking about things like, management tools and, how do you efficiently manage your property? What are the new tools that are coming out? I think one of the interesting parts of the sort of the short-term rental ecosystem right now is there's so many different tools coming out, and it's almost on a daily basis that I get an email from some company or somebody who created a service or a tool to help Airbnb hosts or hosts in general in the short-term rental market. So I think that ecosystem is very interesting, and when you're investing in an Airbnb, like the management part is actually a very big part of it, because if you're buying something overseas, it's going to be much harder to manage it yourself. And so, how do you go about the management? Do you hire a short-term rental management company, or maybe, you can buy a property in a building that already offers management as one of the options, or you could go and find a local person to manage it for you. So there's all these different options, and I think that before you buy a property, you want to think about that before you buy it, right? And so now these are topics that are still going to be interesting for those Airbnb hosts out there who maybe don't have the money the cash to spend to buy a property overseas. And another thing I was going to mention is that it could also be interesting for people who don't have the capital, because you don't necessarily need to buy. I know a lot of people who rent overseas, and I'm actually thinking about doing the same thing. Now, let's say I rent. Let's say here in Panama. I'm in Panama right now. I'm actually planning to get my residency here, so that I'm currently a resident in Holland, and so I technically I have to pay taxes there. In Panama here, it's a bit more tax friendly. And since I don't really spend much time in Holland anyway, it doesn't really make sense that I'm registered there. So I was thinking Panama would be a good choice for me, a good place for me to establish my residency. So I'm currently talking to a lawyer and figuring out all sorts of documentation and stuff like that. But anyway, like I could see myself renting a unit in Panama for like 2 years, and then renting it out when I'm not around, and so that's a model that anyone can pretty much do, right? All you need is you need to have enough cash to pay the 2 or 3 months deposit, or however many months the deposit is. But yeah, so I think and when you're renting, whether you're renting or buying, it's still kind of the same things that you want to look at, right? It's still you're going to be asking yourself, like, okay, is this an area where there's going to be a lot of demand? You want to stay at some Airbnbs in the neighborhood to check out like what type of people visit the place and stuff like that. So whether you rent or buy, it's still the same, almost the same factors that are at play that will determine whether the Airbnb is going to do very well or not. So I'll be interviewing people who've already bought something overseas. Now, I've already interviewed a bunch of those people in the past, but the focus is going to be a little bit more on people who've invested overseas, and also people who run real estate companies overseas. Like the house that I bought in Colombia, I bought it from a company, an American company that established itself over 12 years ago in Colombia. So these guys have a ton of experience and know-how on the real estate market and the short-term rental market in Colombia. And I'll be interviewing the founder pretty soon, so you'll get to learn a lot about the market in Colombia. But the people that do these projects that are in real estate overseas, they have a lot of knowledge, and I'm sure it's going to be really helpful for us as investors to hear from these guys what the different factors are that they look at, and also learn about the different markets out there. Another thing I want to mention is there's going to be a conference in Puerto Rico, and I was invited to speak about the Airbnb opportunities in Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico is I think, a very interesting market, because as you probably know, the country, or I don't even know, it's not really a country, right? It's like a special region within the US. But it went bankrupt, and then also there was a hurricane. So a lot of, obviously, a lot of issues for the local population. I have friends who live in Puerto Rico, and they fortunately their house is still standing. But if you look at the Airbnbs in Puerto Rico, I was just going through a number of them just to kind of like understand the market a bit. And a lot of the titles of the Airbnb listings in Puerto Rico state that there's electricity and water. So I imagine that if you put that in your title, then I guess that's not a guarantee. After the hurricane, there must have been a lot of problems with the electricity and the water. But I think there's two reasons why I think Puerto Rico is an interesting place to look now. Well, first of all, because when stuff like this happen, when there's bankruptcy and a hurricane, that means there's going to be opportunity, most likely. But at the same time, it also, I think it's important for the people that live in Puerto Rico that outside investors come in and spend their money to help and rebuild the country, right? And so, it's kind of like a win-win situation. On the one hand, there's opportunity, and on the other hand, the country also needs investors to come in and invest in the infrastructure, invest in houses and tourism, short stay rental market. So it's a win-win, I think, for outside investors and the people that live in Puerto Rico. So this conference is going to be April 24 until April 26. And if you're interested, there's still a number of tickets available. I think there's 10 or 15 tickets left, so it's almost sold out. But this conference is going to be all about the opportunities that are in Puerto Rico. And the thing that I didn't mention yet is that Puerto Rico is a very tax-friendly area to invest in as well. I don't know if for me personally it matters a lot, but I do think that if you're an American citizen, then I think it's very attractive to invest in Puerto Rico and even move to Puerto Rico. I know a lot of people who've moved to Puerto Rico for this exact reason, because they are paying way lower taxes there. And so if you're interested, just shoot me an email at jasperrivers@gmail.com or send me a message in the Facebook group, Get Paid for Your Pad Facebook group, or there's all sorts of ways to contact me and find me. But if you're interested in going to the conference, as a speaker, I am able to provide a discount to, I think, up to maybe 10 people. I'm not sure. But in any case, if you're interested, let me know. I might be able to hook you up with a cheaper ticket. The conference is going to be pretty interesting, and there's a lot of people who are going to be talking about the tax situation in Puerto Rico, the legal aspects, and the real estate market, and all that kind of good stuff. There's going to be a bus tour as well, where they'll take the attendants to lots of properties in San Juan. It's going to be mostly about San Juan, the capital of Puerto Rico. So they're going to take people to different properties to kind of show them, okay, what's out there, what do the prices look like, what do the apartments look like. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to be talking about the Airbnb situation. So how's the Airbnb market in Puerto Rico, or San Juan in particular, look like? Are people doing a very good job? I'm currently doing the research because I have to submit my presentation by April 10th. And so I'm looking at all these Airbnbs, trying to figure out, what does pricing look like compared to other countries and other comparable markets. I look at the interior design, I look at the branding, all that kind of stuff. And so, the goal of my presentation is really to figure out, okay, is this a very competitive market in terms of Airbnb or short-term rentals, or is it kind of lagging, right? If it's lagging, then if you're doing a very good job on Airbnb, then you might be able to outcompete the other people that are on Airbnb. So that also provides opportunity. So that's it for now. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, like as always, feel free to reach out. Jasper at getpaidforyourpet.com is another email address that I have. And I'll probably be uploading maybe 1 or 2 episodes a week. But again, as I said, they're not going to be on fixed dates. It's just going to be whenever I have a good Wi-Fi connection and whenever I'm able to get somebody on Skype and talk to a guest. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Get paid for your pet. 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 Get paid for your pet.